welcome to another episode of the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. I'm your host, Gene Jackson, and once again, we are here to travel back to 1993. We are going into the fifth week of January, fifth week of the year. And I told you at the end of last week's episode that my usual co-host, Josh Briley and Richard Mulliken, they are out on a special assignment this week. They are not available. So this week, I have a very special co-host, a guy I've known for quite a long time. Let's bring him in right now. He is the one and only Brian Tramel. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
Man, what an introduction there, man. Thanks a lot. Hey, guys, how's it going? I'm happy to be here. We talked right before we went on the air. I guess that's what you say. Big fan of listening to this podcast already. And I hate to tell this, but I don't listen to wrestling podcasts. Because I'm in it all the time, you know. Yeah. But I just returned from Honky Town, USA. So I was down there checking Honky Town out, and man, that was fun. So, but yeah, I'm excited about it. Richard and Josh, P3 Radio, y'all can find that on all your podcast catchers there. They've been doing a podcast. They started a little after I did. And they've been doing it every week. I do a ton of stuff on STSPod.club. We're at episode 800 and going to almost 850.
Holy cow. That blows my mind, man. I remember when it started. I remember in the very beginning. And you know, I caught myself if that introduction felt like it was cut short. I was about to say how long we've known each other, and then I felt like that was going to age us too much, so I just left that out of the
God.
equation.
I don't know the year, but you've got some podcasts. If you like listen to Gene, come over to my feed. We used to do a show called Was It Really That Good? And we've done the Dream Machine. We've done the Fabs. We've done a lot of Memphis people, and we had a really good time. But we met, you probably know the year. I don't know the year. But it was in Gibson, Tennessee, right? Backstage. Right. And you guys were JD McKay was our common factor between me and you. Somehow you knew JD. You knew JD. I knew JD. And we started talking, and we've done all kinds of things together.
Oh yeah, man. We I read on the website with you, Wrestling Right Online.
Right.
And me and you were there at the beginning of podcasts. You know what I mean? Like when me and you started doing podcasts, Cheap Eat Radio and Shooting the Shiznit, there wasn't every sumbitch that ever drew a breath in wrestling did not have a podcast. It was like me, you, Colt Cabana, and Mark Maron, and that was all the podcasts.
2007, right. We were doing a podcast. I did it. I only did 20-something episodes because I didn't know you're supposed to put one out every week, you know. And then
no rules back then, you know. It was just do it when you felt like it.
And then I quit, and then came back to just do the podcast instead of the website, and thinking that the podcast will be less work than doing the website. Didn't you take over my website one time and lasted like 3 days? And you said,
"Oh yeah,"
and you said, "Fuck this, I can't."
Yeah, you retired, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll take that over," and that lasted, maybe a week, and then I tapped out pretty quick on that. But anyway, we won't carry on too much about our history. We weave some into this, but. Like you said, Memphis wrestling is very much an integral part of our history. Because, like I said, when we was writing for the website, we mostly was talking about Corey Macklin's Memphis wrestling at the time. And he wasn't a big fan of either one of us, I don't believe.
Not at all.
And we'll save that talk for another day, or it might get weaved in here. But right now, we are, like I said, this is going into the January 30th. Is that right?
Yep, January 30th show. Y'all done the fourth one with Josh and Richard, and Josh still doesn't like. I just want everybody to know I like the Harris brothers. I want y'all to know that. So
I'm still trying to get to the bottom of what Josh's beef is with the Harris brothers, and it's not like it's something we talked about off the air or it's a running bit or anything. I just kept noticing when I asked these questions at the end of the episode, every week. When we got to the end, Josh is just shitting all over the Bruise Brothers. Anything they did, he hated it every single week.
You know, he said they were dressed. They looked like Brian Lee. Well, Brian Lee is like their half brother or
Yeah,
something.
he's like
They
the
all
third
grew up.
Harris
Yeah, yeah.
brother almost, really. And when, before they got the long dark hair, at one time they almost looked like triplets, because when the Harris brothers first come in, they had the long blonde mullets,
Yep,
and
yep.
you almost could have had three of them. But by now they've changed their look a little bit in the era that we're in now. So
I
so
don't
we
think we get this team. I want to make a comment about the Masters of Terror. Is that what they were called the last?
yes,
You were correct. It was Ken Wayne and Ken Raper. And if I'm correct, Ken Raper actually was a nightmare on the outlaw shows in this area at one time. He wrestled as a nightmare.
oh.
And those suits that they're wrestling in is the Galaxians. Do you remember? It was the Galaxians.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned that on one episode, or I may not have got to it, but I added in my notes that, yes, those were definitely the Galaxian outfits from back when they were managed. Danny Davis and Ken Wayne were managed by Jim Cornette, and
I
eventually
actually
made
got a
their way to WCW to do jobs in them. And
yeah, they worked. I've got a picture of Jim, Bobby, and Danny in the Galaxian gimmick, and they tagged in Steele, Missouri, in my hometown. They tagged one night, the only show that they ever did. Memphis Wrestling did, and they were there.
Wow.
And Ken didn't show up, so it was Danny and Bobby as a tag team. So it was pretty awesome.
I can see you pulling that switch there. You can at that point you could just about switch Bobby for Ken Wayne aesthetically anyway. But so to kick the show off, Dave Brown and Corey Macklin welcome us, and they let us know we have a big day in store here on USWA Wrestling. And then we immediately go to break like we usually do on Memphis. And when we return, Eddie Marlin has joined Dave Brown and promises he is here to tell us about something really special. So let's take a quick look, Brian, at the really special announcement that Eddie Marlin had for us to kick the show off.
And Corey, just before the break, I mentioned we might have something special. We have had this man making some big announcements in the past, but today you've got something really special.
Never one like this, Dave. You sit around and things just sort of ho-ho-hum, and then all of a sudden seem like the biggest thing that's ever happened in your life happens. Well, it happened to me. And, Don King's in town. He's been making a lot of announcements about the big going on.
Punch out tonight.
That's right, yeah. Tonight. Well, I got something that will equal that or top it. Ooh. You sign a match, and everybody in the world, every promoter wants a match. Well, let me tell you what the match is. Jerry the King Lawler against Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig. Now, let me explain.
Now, do you think we may be overselling it a bit, Brian? This is the biggest thing that's ever happened in his life is Curt Hennig coming back to town here in 1993 to wrestle Jerry Lawler for the Unified Title, or is that a fair assessment?
That was a little too much. But, it's wrestling promoter. It's step right up kind of thing. Ringmaster, circus. Come see this. That you've seen 100 times. What bothered me during this promo was the baby crying.
Yes.
I was like, hey, could you tell that baby to shut the hell up? Because that baby's getting on my nerves. But here's the weird thing. Like from 1978 to like 1990, and this is pure shoot, I missed maybe 3 Memphis shows. And all of a sudden, I got married. I got out of college. I owned a restaurant. Show Me Pizza Factory. Shout out. Look, it don't even exist. But rest in peace. And I was not watching Memphis wrestling on a regular basis during this time period. So, yeah, when I found out that y'all were doing this, I started watching it with you guys. I was like, I don't remember any of this. And then I text somebody and said, when do we start that restaurant? Blah, blah, blah. So I was not involved. Do not remember Curt Hennig coming at this time. And I mean, it's a big show. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, Eddie Marlin was giving it a little bit. He was putting it over a little too much for me. So,
but to be fair, if we go back and look over the last 2 weeks of the television, the last 2 episodes of this podcast, if we go back 2 weeks to the episode where it's one of those Monday nights where we're going to have some singles and tag matches, and then we're going to come back in a big 8-man at the end of the night because we really don't have anything this week. So we're just kind of grasping at straws. And then last week, it sounded promising that we were going to have the tag team title tournament first round there on TV. And Josh was happy with it, and Richard was pretty happy with it.
I
didn't
enjoyed
love it. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible, but, you know, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't amazing. So I can understand why Eddie Marlin's like, all right, we probably, you know, I'm sure the gates at the Coliseum probably showed us that too. So I'm sure Eddie's like, we gotta hype this up. We got to get everybody excited about this match. So, you know, he did his part. And so to really drive it home, they show us clips of Lawler versus Hennig from back in 1987, a couple of different matches. We see Lawler winning the AWA World Title in May of '88. And so this was something I want to take a minute to talk to you about, Brian, because I remember as a 10-year-old kid in May of 1988 thinking it was a huge deal that the King in Memphis, that was an hour and a half up the road from where I lived, had won a world heavyweight title. And I was super psyched about it. I went to school the next day. I was telling everybody I had stayed up late that night to watch you know, I'm sure you remember, you know, on the 10 o'clock.
Jack Eaton did the highlight.
Give you the results for the Coliseum. So I stayed up and found out that Lawler won, and I was just over the moon. Went to school telling everybody. And you know, you're a little ahead of me in age, so I just want to kind of get what's your memory of that, and how big of a deal did that seem to you?
It was a big deal. It really was. I was with the wrestling radio out of Philly. We're doing a wrestling radio relive. We're playing some of those old shows, and the reason I say that is Joel Goodhart, Carmela Panfield. We're doing Memphis trips at the time, and then this was a quick. They took people from Philly and not bust them, but they did a plane here to watch that match because Joel Goodhart had told me Lawler's going to win the belt. Why don't you be down there? You know, be down there. Yeah. Well, I had been told the same thing when Lawler wrestled Flair at the American Bash, and someone had keyed me in and said Lawler's supposed to win the belt from Flair tonight. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, Lawler's going to, and, you know, Lawler had never won the belt. That was the big story. And so I didn't think it was going to happen, even though they brought a group all the way from Philly. But, you know, and something about this match, you didn't say it yet, but you probably have noticed it. Jackie Fargo, special referee, slaps it 4 times. There you go, 4 times.
So I was going to say, that's how big of a mark I was at 10 years old. I actually talked my parents into letting me call 3 times to the 800 number or the 900 number where I voted for Jackie Fargo to be the referee because I did not want Larry the Axe Hennig to be the referee and screw Jerry Lawler. So I did my part. I voted 3 times to get Jackie as the referee. And yes, you're right. I don't know if the first one was just him. He thought it was just he was smacking the mat as he went down, but yes.
But Lance counts.
That finish because he counts. He counts to 4. One more, he could have tied Bundy. And,
Lance puts his when Jackie puts his hand down. I may be totally wrong here, but I think when Jackie puts his hand down for the first time, Lance starts counting 1.
He does
2, 3, and then Jackie goes 4.
That's
I was
what makes
like,
it
damn,
so awkward because Lance count as he drops. Lance counts 1, 2, 3, and it's just that obvious 4. And Lance just kind of stops counting. Is like, yeah, all right, new world champion.
It was a big deal. I think it was a big deal. I treated it that way too. I was so you said 88?
May 9th of 1988. I don't know.
So I was in I was in college at the time. So that was I had graduated in 85, so it was a college. Yeah, it was a big deal. It was.
There are family members that I don't know their birthday. There are anniversaries I have trouble remembering, but my entire life, if you'd ever came like, when did Lawler win the world title? May the 9th, 1988, because they drilled that date into us, you know, and I'd ordered the videotape. I told my mom and to let me order the videotape on my birthday that had all the hoopla, you know, because it was Jerry Lawler Day and they did the press conferences and the post-match stuff and all that good stuff. But anyway, So they showed us that to really get us, pumped up. And then they show us footage from last Sunday's Royal Rumble out in California, where Mr. Perfect eliminated Lawler, and then Lawler from the outside helped the bad guys eliminate Perfect. And that put a little extra heat on the upcoming Unified title match as well. And then we went to break. And when we returned from the break, we got Jeff Jarrett, Nightmare Danny Davis out there. Josh Briley's uncle, by the way.
That's right. Uncle Danny. Uncle Danny.
Uncle Danny.
I call him Uncle Nightmare, so there you
go. I've had a few different variations of that on here. Now, I got to say, one thing that stood out to me, I was very excited to see the star painted back on Danny Davis's face.
I was too. I was fired up. Yep.
All these weeks of just plain face Danny Davis didn't feel right. So we got Jeff.
I got a question for you. I'll ask the Danny Davis question during the match we have with him and Brian Christopher later. So go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So they are out there. They're awaiting the King, because as they're standing there, the King's music's already playing. So here comes Lawler out there, and they're congratulating him and shaking his hand for defending his title against Mr. Perfect this week. I mean, they're congratulating him like he's going to WrestleMania to challenge Bret Hart for the WWF title or something. And Lawler even addresses that and goes like, well, I don't know if there's anything to congratulate me on yet, but
right. He's like, what? Yeah. I love that suit that Lawler's wearing too. I marked out big time for that. That is the big deal right there. It meant the whole extra, and I just love that suit. So
I remember renting one of those Jerry Lawler home videos that they made, and he stood there wearing that through the whole thing as a kid, and then I was like, man, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I made sure to get the action figure where he's wearing that. It's sitting over there on my
For some reason, I thought you were going to say you rented it and you wore it around the house.
If I could, I would. I would have wore it to, like,
well, by the way, here's the surprise for today. No.
Yeah, I'd have that on at my wedding, all kinds of, life events. Let's do a little sample of what the King had to say here.
For a long time, I just want to publicly congratulate you, and I know this is one step closer to unifying the titles, and that's your ultimate quest.
Well, you guys, maybe the congratulations may be a little bit premature, but I hope not.
We have
confidence.
Mr. Lawler, I've got confidence in you. All of us got confidence in you. I want you to know that, or we wouldn't put up all the chips. All the chips, buddy. Come through for us, buddy.
Well, congratulations, King. And hey, we wish you good luck come Monday night. This is going to be one of the biggest bouts I've been around.
Let me add my congratulations to you. I know it's been a long time coming, and again, with the title on the line, one more step closer to unification. Good luck.
Curt Hennig now is Mr. Perfect. He thinks he can do everything perfectly. But there will always be one big blemish on Curt Hennig's perfect record, and you're looking at him right here. Because like you said on that film, in May of 1988, he came to Memphis, Tennessee, and he walked away from here a big loser. He left Memphis without the World Heavyweight Championship belt, and he knows that he was no longer perfect. He knows that he was a loser from that day on, and he could go all over the world and call himself perfect, but as long as I had this belt, he knew deep down in his heart that he wasn't perfect.
Oh, Corey Macklin's expression cracked me up there. He's like,
that has become a fun part of
why is he standing up? It's what I
don't know. Well, he had to come around and he had to get his handshake in. Congratulations, King!
You guys have
ever been a part of.
Right. He's the promo was excellent. I thought you didn't show this part of it, but he tells a great story about arriving for the Royal Rumble and going in the dressing room and everyone's saying, "Hey, how you doing?" And someone's shit in his bag. No, wait. No, he didn't tell that story.
I was hoping that's where that story was going when he started.
But
he actually tell the story.
Yeah, he actually says Hennig was the only guy that was healing on him. He was like, "Oh, he's not saying anything to him."
I guess we're not bringing Steve Kern in anytime
soon.
No,
that's for sure. But yeah, it was awesome. I thought that part of it was awesome. They put it in, and Hennig did a promo, which you may going to show that, but I'm
fixing to show a little bit.
I thought all that was really good.
Jerry Lawler, I can't put over enough. Jerry Lawler could go out there and cut a promo about a match coming up with Keith Eric or Rough and Ready. And
don't be talking about Rough and Ready now or Keith Eric.
Rough and
Damn you.
I'm going to tell this real quick because
Right.
you'll appreciate it. I'm sorry, folks. This is a complete sidebar here. But in Amory, Mississippi, when me and Neil Taylor had a tag team match against Lawler and Derek King, I very rarely ever planned out promos, but I had a line in the back of my head that I planned to get in, and then Lawler had brought the guy from A Christmas Story that hangs out with him
yeah.
year, and there was all these other shenanigans going on, and Brian Christopher showed up and all this, and we didn't really get a chance to cut a promo. But I wanted to start the match out just to rib Derek, and I was going to be like, gee, Neil, I don't know what we're going to do tonight. I mean, we're in here with a bona fide Hall of Famer, Jerry the King Lawler, and then another Memphis TV star. Were you rough or ready? I never can remember. And I figured Derek would have had to hide his laugh on that.
Oh, that's good.
You know
Keith Eric came to we had a wrestling convention. I think this was the one that JD actually put together in Memphis. And Keith Eric came to the con to hang out with us, and he won the wrestling trivia contest. This man was a walking encyclopedia when it came to wrestling knowledge. I mean, some of the most obscure stuff you could ever come up with, he knew the answer to. So Keith Eric is no longer with us. So.
I hate to hear that. I was about to say maybe we need to track him down and get him on the show, but I suppose not. But I saw a lot of Keith Eric matches on Memphis TV.
Boy, I did too. Yes.
Apparently, he saw a lot of Memphis matches as well. So
Yeah.
Let's hear what Mr. Perfect has to say about this upcoming match with the King.
Jerry Lawler, you call yourself a king? The king of Memphis, the king of wrestling? What you did to Mr. Perfect at the Royal Rumble isn't funny. It doesn't sit well with me. If it wasn't for you, I would have won the Royal Rumble. But no, you were already on the outside, Lawler, and you grabbed me and you pulled me down to the floor and had me eliminated. Now, Lawler, I know you don't want to go any further in your own backyard to wrestle Mr. Perfect. I know right there in Memphis, that's your home. That's where your people are. That's where you feel your best. Well, take a look at Mr. Perfect. You know where I feel my best? The best place I feel is up in the ring, and it doesn't matter whether it's in Memphis, Miami, New York, Chicago. When I step inside the ring, I am what I say I am, Lawler, and I'm perfect. But when you take a look at Mr. Perfect from top to bottom, Lawler, and you take a look at yourself with that silly little crown on your head like you popped in from some Imperial Margarine commercial, who do you think you are? And when I get to Memphis and I get my hands on you and everybody else in Memphis is going to know that what Mr. Perfect says is true. And the truth is, I am what I say I am. And nobody beats Mr. Perfect, Jerry Lawler. Nobody.
I love the green screen with the columns with his head on top of them back there. That's always
I love Curt Hennig. I thought he was I always liked him in WWE, and I loved the whole deal, and liked him when he was in AWA. I like that stuff too. Big Curt Hennig fan. So I love being able to do, like you said, it's the green screen, but it makes it. And you talk about this last 3 episodes. We're fixing it, as we say in the South. Get ready for kind of like an invasion of WWE people. It started with you had Sapphire, and you had. I didn't know Honky Tonk Man ever stepped out as Honky Tonk Man. By the way, it was hilarious with him introducing himself to Dave Brown like Dave didn't know who the hell he was. But
and again, Corey had to come in and get a big introduction in the middle of that as well.
Corey Macklin?
Hey, I'm Corey Macklin, Honky Tonk Man.
But I don't remember that. But we're starting something this year, and I remember, like I said, I wasn't watching it week by week, but did get either I was recording it or got the tapes from somebody. I had sold my wrestling tape collection in '91, so I wasn't collecting anymore. But crazy to have Hennig, and then we just keep on getting people more and more into it, the WWE people. And Lawler has that, always had that explanation. We're so much better here. We don't need the WWE.
Oh, yeah.
But then boom, but they did a good job with it, I thought.
And it's funny, and we've touched on this in previous episodes. But if you're watching the whole episodes, every week when Corey runs down the action coming up around the area, Honky was doing all kinds of spot shows. He was
but not doing Memphis. What was that about?
I don't think, unless he pops up down the line here, he did not do a single Monday Night Memphis card. He popped up on TV last week and had that little altercation with Jeff Jarrett. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but Jeff Jarrett alludes to him possibly being here this Monday night. But he never appears at the Coliseum. He just does these spot shows and that one appearance on TV. So it's kind of weird. But with those 2 promos, the table is set for Monday night. We now have Bad Blood established from the title loss in '88. We have the Unified World Title on the line now, which they link to the title that he beat Curt for in '88. We have the fact that Lawler, caused Hennig a shot at the WWF title at WrestleMania. So all that's certainly more stakes than any other match we've had here on USWA in recent weeks. So
I want to make a quick note I did with my notes is if you were in the studio and was watching the promos, the Hennig promo, the promo was being played on this monitor that was about that big, and you were sitting in the crowd. It was according to where you was at. And the whole crowd would get real quiet when somebody was on a monitor, but you could barely see what was going on. Most of the time, I would come home and I had recorded the show I was at and would watch it so I could see what the hell was going on. But I always thought that was really funny. Like the first time I was there at the TV tapings, I was in shock. I don't know. I guess I thought they had this big screen or something. They were going to show it, but it was a tiny monitor, like a 13 or 15-inch monitor.
I always wondered that watching it as a kid, like if how the people in the studio were seeing it. And a couple of times when they cut to break, and that promo in particular, you see that screen that you're referring to, and it's like, geez, is that how they were watching these?
Yeah,
promos?
it was. It was lame as hell. So yeah. Well, that studio was lame as hell. If you, it was bleachers, and then if you went backstage, that's where everybody stood around. It was a TV studio. It wasn't a wrestling arena. It was real strange. So,
I never got I went to the Coliseum several times, but I never got a chance to go to any of the TV, shows at the studio. So, that's cool to have a little insight into how that come off, from a fan perspective. And I'm hoping some of the guys we got coming on that work there, I'm wanting to get a little input from them on the studio. Because I've heard from guys that wrestled there in later years, and, it wasn't a dressing room setting like you had in any other show. It's these guys just out getting dressed just in random parts of a TV studio.
And you said something about there's some story somewhere where Brian Christopher clogs up the toilet. Someone told that. I don't know for some reason.
It wasn't me, but I have heard it though.
Yeah. There's something there where all the guys, but just the whole experience. I went one summer, me and my friend Lynn, shout out to Lynn Pearson. We went probably 10 times in one summer. Sometimes we'd go to the Coliseum, but we would go. His brother lived in Memphis, and his brother would come pick us up, and we would, it was like an hour drive for us, and we would go because you could get free tickets. It was free for you to go in. So
Yeah, I hate I never got to go. I got to go once I was in college. I went to a few shows at the Coliseum. I even went to a couple shows at the Big One Flea Market out there.
Oh, God, I never did that. No.
That was interesting, but we'll get to that eventually here on the old USWA podcast. But anyway, on the TV show, we go to break, and then we finally return to our first match of the day. We get our standard yelling promo from one of the Harris brothers, and we're not going to, you all gotten the gist of that over the weeks. We don't have to go there. But we go to the ring, match one, the USWA Tag Team Champions, the Bruise Brothers, Ron and Don Harris, with Mike Samples taking on TD Steele and Johnny Jet. And we do have a little clip of this match. And then I kind of want to talk to you. Like I said, you said you don't dislike the Bruise Brothers.
No, I actually like the Bruise Brothers. Yeah. Because
I do want to kind of get some input.
Okay. All right.
The highlights here.
You don't walk away from me. I got things to say. Now we got a match. I don't care what you got. You don't understand. This is the baddest tag team in the world. They're the biggest. They're the toughest. They're the meanest. They will not be beat by anyone at any time, and that includes you, Dave Brown. So don't walk away from me like you own this company. You understand?
Well, they just clombering away on TD Steele. They just kind of want a big double boot in there. And
slamming away on the left shoulder there, T.D. Still. Bruise Brothers, Ron and Don Harris, managed by Mike Sapples, out here running wild today. Boots to the midsection of T.D. Other Harris brother, it's been all Bruise Brothers against T.D. Still is what it's been. Now they both grab Johnny Jett over there. T.D.'s partner just kicking away and stomping on Johnny. Got him over on the concrete floor. Look at him stomp down on Johnny Jett. All these Bruise Brothers running wild in here today. Working over T.D. Still's left shoulder. Just a jerking on him there. Covers him too and picks him up after two. Johnny Jett, his partner, comes in and try to help T.D. out, and the big Bruise Brother grabs him. Oh, comes over and gets the World Tag Title. One half of it, and now Johnny Jett with that belt. Oh, boy. Look at him just beat up on Johnny.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Oh,
I mean, they
yeah.
pull that kid over here and they grab. They don't.
Hey, look at referee Paul Neighbors. He's trying to help T.D. Still in there. He's watching out for T.D.'s arm. He's got him covered, too. And, boy, that left arm of T.D. Still is just hanging about now,
The
Dave.
referee is gone. Paul Neighbors has stopped the match.
Yeah, his arm is hurting there. Paul is trying to hold T.D. to
Oh,
stop
look
him
out.
in
Mike
there.
Samples jumps in there. He's not happy that the match was stopped.
So, this is what has become our typical Bruise Brothers match, where we just see them just brutalizing these enhancement guys week in and week out. But there was one big exception in this match I noticed pretty early here, is they seemed to zero in on TD Steele's shoulder, and most of their offense was working on TD's shoulder.
TD was tapping at one time. Did you see that?
Yeah, that wasn't a thing in 1993.
No,
tapping.
But he was trying to get them to stop fucking with his arm.
But I guess that was because the story of the match was eventually going to be that Paul Neighbors is going to stop it because
it looked legit to me. It looked like they did beat the hell out of him. We do know that, but yeah.
Well, so that's the main thing I want to ask you is, like, up to now, the most brutal tag team in Memphis history has been the Moondogs as far as enhancement guys are concerned.
Oh, yeah.
So the irony of the Harris brothers feuding with the Moondogs, and now you've got two teams beating the hell out of so you've got at least 4 enhancement guys a week that are just getting the shit kicked out of them. So what's your take on the Harris brothers here in the presentation?
I like the Harris brothers. They looked like versions of Bruiser Brody. I was a big Bruiser Brody fan. I always wondered, and they may think differently than I think, but I think they should have been bigger than they were. I mean, they could have put those two guys in WWE, and someone's going to correct me and say, well, they did go, but I don't remember them getting a push whatsoever. So
no, I mean, they come in as the Blue Twins with Dutch as Uncle Zebekiah.
Oh yeah, I forgot
in that '95 era where you had Dirty White Boy as a plumber and all this silliness going on. And then, of course, later they came back as bikers in the DOA and the Attitude Era. But in this time frame, the only other place they had a lot of success was, Smoky Mountain. And I think they went down to Puerto Rico and beat the hell out of people because, Brody. But like I said,
I wouldn't have gotten the ring with
you. And I'm kind of oh God, no. I'm kind of fascinated with Josh's distaste for them. I keep expecting them to do something brutal to Uncle Danny at some point. That's going.
Maybe that's it. Maybe he's healing on. I always think when I look at guys like the Moondogs and Ricky Hayes, he worked the Moondog one time, and he just took and Ricky was a local guy in the Dyersburg area. He worked what we used to call outlaw shows. And Ricky would take a beat, and him and Sergeant O'Reilly would take beatings. But every time I saw the Moondogs or the Harris Brothers doing stuff like this, I would be thinking, I would be the guy that backstage that brought his bag and said, if y'all need me, guys, I'll go out there and I'll be on TV. And as soon as he said, well, we need you to work the Harris Brothers, I'd be like, I got an emergency call. I got to go.
Yeah.
See you later. Bye. So, yeah.
My horse is sick. Yeah, I wouldn't stick around for that one either. They said that a lot of people would run off when they heard they had to wrestle the Moondogs, and the WCW locker room people heard they were wrestling the Steiners, and they would suddenly have
They say,
something
see you
better to
later,
do.
bye. Yeah.
And I don't blame them. But with what we just saw happen, we had a little bit of post-match shenanigans with Mike Samples and referee Paul Neighbors, who just stopped this match. So let's take a look at a little bit of this right here.
I don't know if he disqualified the Bruise Brothers. Apparently he did, the way Samples is so upset. What is this?
Oh, look at Mike Samples. Boy, he'll be fine for that, let me tell you. Just now, referee Paul Neighbors in there. Slams down on Paul again while the Bruise Brothers work over TD still. And TD's left arm is just barely hanging on to that.
That's why the referee stopped the match, because TD is hurt. Look at this.
Oh, look at the referee. Oh, Paul Neighbors. Jumped on Samples in there. Oh, but the Bruise Brothers.
Wow. Samples attacked Paul Neighbors, and Neighbors finally had enough of it and retaliated, but now there comes some help.
So
Samples
isn't happy that Neighbors stopped the match. So he punches Paul Neighbors. Paul Neighbors takes him down and hits him with some punches and such. And eventually the Harris brothers pull him off, and both Harris brothers and Mike Samples start to kick the shit out of Paul Neighbors, which brings out Jeff Jarrett and Nightmare Danny Davis to make the save. And this leads to one of those things that I don't love about Memphis. We talked about
they
earlier
do this if it's a referee, a manager, there's so many stipulations surrounding all of this. It's so convoluted that you're like, wait, what? $1,000? It's going $1,000? Wait,
I didn't take a clip of this because I know you weren't going to be excited about watching it. I'm not really excited about watching it. We're going to have to talk about it quickly because it's part of the show. But
right.
Promo, Eddie Marlin comes out to fine Mike Samples $1,000 for attacking the referee. No mention of the fact the Harris brothers just stomped the shit out of him too. Sample says that Neighbors attacked him first, or attacked him too, so he should be fined as well. This brings Neighbors out, who says, I can't afford the fine, so I'm giving you my notice. This is going to be my last day. And again, we're not going to look at a clip, but Mike Sample ends up, long story short, Mike Sample suggests that they have a match. Now, Dave Brown or Eddie Marlin points out that Mike Samples recently lost a match where he can't wrestle in USWA anymore.
That's right. He can't wrestle. Yep.
That's right. But I can box. So this means Mike Samples lays out a double or nothing challenge to fight referee Paul Neighbors in a boxing match. Where Sample loses, he pays both sets of fines, a grand total of $2,000. But if he wins, then both fines are just wiped away, and neither he nor the referee he's mad at, either one have to pay a fine. So Marlin agrees to this. The match is added to Monday night's card. And this, the main reason I even really bring this up is we've wondered out loud on this podcast recently. A lot of times you could kind of tell who was booking at the time based on certain things, if it was Lawler or if it was Jarrett. And I had said, some of the shit that's going on right now, I don't know that it's either one. So I had a couple of people, most notably Mike Needham of the Reckless Abandon podcast, who was a good friend of Brian Christopher's and kind of has a little insight. But I had a few other people
Mike.
Me too, to point out that Mike Samples was actually booking during this small window here in January.
Did not know that.
Of 93. Which makes so many things of recent times make sense. I'm pretty sure he's not booking the Lawler and Hennig angle, but this angle right here, I now understand why this is going on.
I thought the funniest part about this, number one, from the time the referee, and Paul Neighbors, isn't he the guy that ended up with a bunch of wrestling tapes? Doesn't he got good quality, I think, Memphis wrestling.
So. His son's on Facebook. His son likes and shares a lot of the stuff.
Yeah. I think he ended up with a lot of. I hate the whole referee thing, and I don't like it. But Samples said, he says, Eddie, he's seen the books, is what he said. And Eddie Marlin's stealing the fine money. So he's just putting it in his pocket.
Yeah, this fine money is not accounted for.
Yeah. I like that line. I thought that was funny. And by the way, a trivia note about Mike Samples, he made wrestling rings. So tons of wrestling rings in this area were made by Mike Samples at one time. So
he still does. There's a new promotion coming up and starting in Mississippi, the next great wrestling promotion in Mississippi.
All right.
And I hear Mike Samples is currently making them a ring. So
you know how I feel about Mississippi wrestling. So
I know it's near and dear to your heart. You love it, and I'm sure they can reserve you a spot in the front row of that very first show.
Right.
And Mike Needham told me another fun fact that we'll get to here shortly. But we'll wait on that because we're leading in to match number 2 here on the program today, and it's going to feature what we're calling the new Moondogs, because we had Spot and Spike. Spike got injured allegedly. I assume that's true. I've never heard otherwise, but I know Memphis, has people come and go quite frequently. So we're introducing a new Moondog named Splat. Now, are you familiar with who Splat was?
I tried to look him up, and I think I had Downtown Bruno on my podcast, and I think this is one of those guys that Bruno said he thought could have at one time been really, really a good deal, big deal, since he was such a big guy. But I don't know much about
who he is. You know who he is.
Who?
You remember Downtown Bruno's tag team of Big Bubba and the Mighty Goliath?
Mighty Goliath, then.
This is Goliath.
Yes, that's who he was talking about. Yeah.
That's exactly who Splat was.
Huge guy. Man, he's big.
Yes. By Moondog standards, they were all kind of, the same, size roughly around. But holy, this is the tallest, biggest Moondog we've ever seen. So it was kind of fun because we've had this feud. As long as we've been doing this podcast now, we've had this feud with the Moondogs and the Bruise Brothers, but it actually backs up into 1992. So it's been going on a pretty good while now. And, the Bruise Brothers have had this height advantage. They've had a little bit of a size advantage on the Moondogs. And so this is where we see Moondog Splat for the first time. What happened is match number 2 was supposed to be the Moondogs with Richard Lee taking on Mr. Clyde, my favorite name of a wrestler. And like I said, we'll talk about him in a minute. And the Punisher. Well, as they're waiting in the ring for the Moondogs, the Harris brothers come out and tell them, get lost. We're going to take over the match, which I'm sure was the best news Mr. Clyde and the Punisher had heard all day. So the Harris brothers are waiting in the ring for these new Moondogs, and we're going to see their first look at Moondog Splat and watch them square up here in the ring.
And that crowd was so hot for this. When the Bruise Brothers started barking, man, they were hot. They were so hot. They were loving it, waiting for the Moondogs to come out.
Absolutely. Check this out, y'all.
Uh-oh.
Oh, boy.
Would you look at that new Moondog? That is Moondog Splat.
Man, look at that.
He's huge, man.
He is blowing that whistle, and the Moondog, look at Moondog Splat in there. Boy, he's got so much weight on him, he can barely leap over that top rope in there.
He just standoff here so far.
If he can get the Bruise Brothers to tangle up with him, they're holding off. They're kind of backing up from the Moondog. Moondog's going after him, and and Mike Samples jumps in the middle now and says, yeah, just hold out just a minute.
Yeah, look at this. Well.
So Moondog Splat, not the most graceful person stepping over the top rope. He eventually got over it, but it was a struggle, as Corey Macklin was nice enough to point out for him.
Yeah, I was like, why did you point that out? You don't point out their mistakes, especially babyface.
Wait on him, man. You can't hardly get over that rope, Dave. And you tell Dave's like, geez, Corey, what are we doing? But he gets in there, and they manage to back down the Harris brothers, which is a big statement for the way they've run rampant all over everybody. So like you said, the crowd's all over, man. They're all behind the Moondogs. So now, unfortunately for Mr. Clyde and the Punisher, They got to come back out and have this
Oh,
match.
God.
And the Harris brothers just decided to leave.
Yeah,
So,
can you imagine? Here's what we're going to do, but they don't tell them. They don't tell them they have to go out there and take a beating for the Moondogs. Y'all go ahead, go out there and take a beating.
So I had tried to do some research on Mr. Clyde. The only things I could find out about Mr. Clyde was the fact that he came in and then eventually he disappears here in 93. He shows back up as Ali bin Khan doing.
I heard you say that, but I don't even
Yeah.
remember him. I don't remember that. So.
And that gimmick's exactly what you would picture when you hear
Right,
that name.
right.
But now I couldn't find out how he got in the business, what his background is. Well, Mike Needham told me that Mr. Clyde was actually a good friend of Brian Christopher, Tony Williams, Kevin Lawler, and Scott Bowden. And so he was in their little wrestling, fandom group, and was Mr. Clyde's entryway into wrestling. Now,
they had their own little wrestling group in the neighborhood. In their neighborhood, they've had their the matches. Bowden, I talked to Scott about it a couple of times, and I think Brian Christopher talked about it too, where they fought. That's how he learned how to wrestle. Was he never was officially trained, which is when you look at Brian Christopher matches, you're just he was a natural, such a natural with everything.
Absolutely. I've said a couple times on this podcast that I hope if this podcast doesn't serve any other purpose, it serves the purpose of showing people what a great heel Brian Christopher was and how talented he was beyond the dancing Grandmaster Sexay stuff from WWF, which, it served its purpose and he did good at that. But man, I wish he would have got a chance to showcase on a national stage the things he did here in Memphis, because it's a lot of fun. But we're going to take a quick look here as the Moondogs are decimating. And I was going to point out, too, that being a friend to those guys didn't really help Mr. Clyde out. He's got his foot in the door, but it also got him a match with the Moondogs here. But the Bruise Brothers decide that once they're tied up with Mr. Clyde and Punisher, maybe they'll come back out here and fight them after all. So let's take a look at a real quick clip here of the Harris brothers running back in here on the new Moondogs. I wonder, they kept talking about the new Moondog. I wonder if Splat had that new Moondog smell. It has to be better than an old Moondog smell, right?
Oh, good God, yes.
Here comes the Bruise Brothers. Ron and Don Harris, Mike Samples, and Bert Prentice.
Yeah, Samples and Prentice have jumped Richard Lee 2 against 1 down on the floor across the way. Meanwhile, the Bruise Brothers have each grabbed a Moondog. And Mr. Clyde and the Punisher are over there helping out.
Yeah, Mr. Clyde and the Punisher are putting that time in there. That's 2 cents.
So it's 4 against 2. Moondog Splat just took Mr. Clyde and the Punisher and just picked them both up at the same time and threw them about a quarter of a way across the ring. There's Mr. Clyde being thrown again across the ring. Look at this guy. He picks up the Punisher. There he goes through the ropes down on the floor. He has been summarily dispatched to somewhere else. Boy, splash up in the standing splash in the turnbuckles. And Mr. Clyde has got to be wondering what happened. There he goes out of the ring.
Yeah, Mr. Clyde is...
And Moondog Splat does that to the Harris brothers. Splat, their heads go together. And once again...
Oh, Bert Prentice is left in there.
Oh.
And the big Moondog knows Prentice, and they hot-tailing out of there.
Oh, Bert Prentice!
All right, I wanted to. Maybe I'm being a little too. I'm being too harsh, but what was your takeaway from that right there?
Oh, I didn't have any. I mean, it was the Moondogs, so you didn't expect. But the guys just take a beating. That's all it is. So.
Well, okay. So here's what I found weird about that little segment we just watched. Okay, so the Harris brothers run in, and that's fine. It's Memphis. We're gonna have the run in for the DQ. That's perfect. But at one point, we've got Ron and Don double teaming Spot in one corner. We've got Bert Prentice and Mike Samples just kicking the shit out of Richard Lee to the point that Bert's completely blown himself up over there. Splat manages to take back over on Punisher and Mr. Clyde. He takes out the Punisher, hurls him out of the ring, shoots Mr. Clyde in the corner, splashes him, he looks over there. Clearly, he looks over and he sees his partner getting double teamed. He sees his manager getting double teamed. He casually goes over. He picks up Mr. Clyde, tosses him out of the ring. So finally, Spot just breaks the eyes of one of the Harris brothers and breaks free to go save Richard Lee. And once Spot breaks free and saves Richard Lee, then Splat comes over and gets involved and then runs them off. But up to then, our new Moondog that we're all excited about is just meandering around while Richard Lee is getting
he's just
just
like a dog. You have a couple of dogs. One of them pays attention, does exactly what he's supposed to do, and the other one's just running around and you can't get them both together at the same time. Here's something about Larry, Spot Moondog, that really, when I worked around him, even though I know, he's a Moondog, blah, 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 when we were backstage, he was the nicest guy you could ever meet. And I wonder about that. Like, he would beat the hell out of these guys, but they probably wouldn't say anything to him because, man, I really like Larry. He's nice. But
I gotta imagine he was probably like, "You okay, brother?" Afterwards,
afterwards.
Like, hey, brother,
yeah.
Is that okay? Is that okay? And they've got a chair imprint on their back and their nose is bleeding. They're like, "Yeah, man, that was great."
I was working with my tag team, heel tag team, and he was a babyface in Dyersburg, and he said he had me come over and he gave me the idea he had for the next week. And I said, I've told this story on my podcast, but he said, okay, here's what I want you to do, BT. He says, I want you to grab my kid out of the crowd. And we're talking about a 13 to 14-year-old kid. And I was supposed to grab him out of the crowd and beat him with a belt. Yes, beat him on his back, lay it in, as he said. And so in my mind, and I know, what's this leading to?
Oh, justification to kill you.
So I go over.
You beat up my kid. You're gonna have to take one good chair shot at least.
I said, what's this leading to? What are we going to do after this? He goes, oh, we'll have a lumberjack strap match and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, give me just a minute. So I went over to my boys and I said, what, you guys, this is what he wants me to do. And they looked at me and you could just see it in their eyes. They said, man, we got shoot jobs. We can't be beat to death. I turn around and I go to Larry and I said, hey, man, I said, no disrespect. Please don't think I'm disrespecting you. But, man, I cannot do that. My boys aren't doing the lumberjack strap match. They have shoot jobs. I know this is your job, and I don't want to disrespect you. And he goes, well, thank you. Thanks for coming up to me and telling me you didn't want to do it. I said, all right. And so they would put up the card for next week. And so they put the card up. It was Naughty by Nature against my boy Sex and Candy, and it was a loser league town match. So we left after that because I refused to do an angle. I never held anything against him or anything for it, but we were not going to do it. We were not going to do it.
Broke y'all's backs, like. And then they got Blaylock to do it, and he said, first of all, anyway, then we got our weekly Richard Lee promo. And we've learned once again, after this is 2 weeks in a row, that no amount of stomping, kicking, chair shots, whatever you do to Richard Lee, it's not going to stop him from getting up and cutting his heated promo afterwards for Monday night. Last week, the Harris brothers stomped his arm into a fine powder, and he still got up and he still cut a promo.
It was hanging. It was hanging from
much the same.
Yeah,
I love that. I missed this earlier, but the fact you said that reminded me. I love that. Corey mentioned how TD Steele, after the 10th shoulder breaker on him, his arm's just hanging there.
Yeah.
I got expected it was like hanging by a tendon there, just about to fall off.
Yeah.
But yes, Richard Lee lets us know that they're looking for revenge Monday night. And of course, why wouldn't they? And so now, Brian, we're ready to take our first podcast commercial break of the show. And of course, we'll be right back. But I do want you to watch this little clip that we're going to see as we go to commercial break. We're going to talk about it on the other side.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday at noon, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/wrestlepod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, the podcast that's based on the old school but can still help you find the good stuff from today. Jimmy Street and the Plastic Sheik, Jared, are the undisputed tag team champions of the wrestling podcast world. From thought-provoking topics to superstar interviews to action figure expertise. This team does it all, and all they ask is, give me back my pro wrestling! Every other Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, he looked down.
We want to thank our sponsors there, but I just wanted to point out that, I talked about Mr. Clyde being friends with those guys, but it did not help when he was getting a face full of Moondog titty right there. Look at that. I mean, just right in the old mouth. Like, bless his heart. That's tough.
Oh, man. Mr. Clyde, what a wrestling name. Yeah, I love
exactly. We talked about that in earlier episodes. Like, you were involved in wrestling. I was involved in wrestling. Of course, Richard was. And, I just labored over what my name was going to be for months and months and months. And it's like, how long did it take him to come? Like, did he come up with that in the car on the way there? Or was it like, what do you want to be? I think Mr. Clyde's pretty cool. And then somebody's like, you don't get any better than that, dude. That's perfect.
I spent a lot of time with my name too. BT. That was my coach BT.
Sure.
And then when the fans would ask me what the BT was for, I would say for bad times. That's what it is. Bad times. And then and I got that from, who was the referee? Kenny D always said I don't know. He did something like that. And then the fans one night started chanting big tits at me for BT. So Coach Big Tits. There you go.
Well, I'm sure you like them. So worst things to be called, I guess. But so we come back from the break. Dave and Corey run down the card for Monday night, but we'll wait and cover that at the end of the show as we usually do with Josh and Richard, and we'll let Dave tell us the card, and then we'll get your thoughts on it. But next up, we get a promo from Jeff Jarrett that starts out by him taking a dig at the King, saying the Dallas Cowboys was going to win the big foosball game going on, which Corey enthusiastically agreed with. I can't believe Corey spoke out against the King there, but he agreed with that the Cowboys were going to win. And then we get down to business mention Friday night in Blytheville, Arkansas. Jarrett always seems to touch on the local shows and all.
That is, Blytheville, Arkansas was where I started watching wrestling. The first show I went to, and they mentioned Kennett, which I went to Kennett. I actually promoted in that building, and they mentioned Jonesboro also, and all three towns is, especially Blytheville. I was there from 78 to whenever. After I got out of high school, it was a American Legion building, and they sold beer. And we would have this guy buy us beer when we were 18 or 19 years old. And we would drink beer while we watched wrestling. But it was a rowdy crew too, but just a great place to have wrestling. And me and you talked about this one time, I think, that Blytheville had a special section. And Sputnik Monroe had a lot to do with trying to change all that, but they had a special section for just black people. And just crazy back then, the way it was fixed. And I remember Virgil coming, Soul Train Jones coming, and him going into that part of the crowd when he was there. But I saw tons of people in Blytheville, from Hulk Hogan. I mean, you name it. Michael Hayes, just star after star. Doug Gilbert before he even got into business. Just tons of Miss Elizabeth sat in the crowd when Randy Savage was. Yes, it was his girlfriend at the time.
Don't talk to Coach Big Tits, huh?
But yeah, it is to me. It's when he started saying Blytheville, I sent a message to my co-host Lance Levine and said, "Oh, be there, be there. Come on, be there, Blytheville." But Kennett, Blytheville, Jonesboro, all places that I went to.
Now, see, here's something weird. I grew up in all the way over in Aberdeen, Mississippi, but my mother is from Kennett, Missouri. My father grew up in Zenith.
Oh, wow.
So we would go there a lot to see family. So I actually got to go to a couple of Memphis wrestling shows in Kennett.
Oh, wow.
Back when I was a kid in the 80s. So it always popped to me whenever they would talk about Kenneth and Blytheville, because I knew all those places because we went there quite a bit when I was a kid.
That's
and
really
I actually saw Memphis wrestling in Kennett, Missouri before I ever saw it in Mississippi, close to my house. So,
we might have been at the same show, Gene.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible.
Crazy.
It's funny.
Crazy.
One of the first shows I did with our mutual friend, the late great Psycho. I asked him where he's from. He said, "You've never heard of it," and I said, "Oh, well, try me." And he said, "From Kennett." And I told him I had family from there. I used to go to Kennett all the time. And he's like,
right.
"Oh my gosh, what a small world!" Because most people
Kennett
have no
wrestling,
reason to know what Kenneth is.
Kennett had huge wrestling fans. We drew big crowds every time we did I had a promotion at CCW. Every time we did, but Psycho was from Kennett, and he sold tons of tickets. But yeah, Kennett, when they started going over these, I was all excited, and I know it's just a big kid in me came out. So,
and they even got their own concession stand brawl there at one point.
Oh yeah, they did. Yeah, it's a great match. Yeah,
it's featured on one of those USWA tapes that's on.
Wasn't
my YouTube
it? It
channel.
was the year before, right? When they
won
it was
in '92 during
feud
the
of the year. Yeah,
with Jarrett and starts out or Fuller and Jarrett, and then Lawler and Jarrett against the Moondogs. It was basically Jarrett against the Moondogs for the whole year, and it
right
seemingly never got old. But yeah, there's a video compilation of it. I got it on the YouTube channel, and talking to Ray Russell about we need to do a video cast, like watch along, where we talk over that. So I think that'd be fun. But let's hear a little bit of what old Double J, even though he's not quite Double J
This
yet,
is confusing as hell to me. So
say.
Okay, go ahead.
But Monday night? Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
This Phantom, this rock and roll Phantom, can you tell us anything about him? I don't know the rock and roll Phantom.
I don't know too much about him, but I do know one thing. I know 3 guys that are connected with rock and roll that wrestle. 2 of them are the Rock and Roll Express, and they wrestle for the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Organization, and it's not them that's going to be here Monday night. And there's one other guy. So, Dave, and another thing, this other guy that's connected with rock and roll, I know one thing. He wants a Southern Heavyweight title shot just as bad as I do. And I don't know if you failed to mention that, but the winner of this match Monday night gets a Southern Heavyweight title shot. So, Brian Christopher, I know you're behind this whole thing. I know that you want to put guys and try to knock me down and try to keep me in the back where I don't get a title shot. Well, that's fine and dandy, because I'm going to knock them down just as quick as they come. And Brian Christopher, as far as I'm concerned, after Monday night, I'm going to be worrying about Dutch Mantel, because I think he'll be the Southern Heavyweight title. Dave, we'll see you later.
Yeah, sure. You're going to tell me the results, but I have you actually told me it was Honky Tonk Man, and I really didn't even think about it. I didn't even think about it. So,
it's not the Honky Tonk Man.
It's not.
Jeff Jarrett is insinuating to everyone that it's the Honky Tonk Man.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't have a clip of this promo, so it's not really going to spoil anything to mention it. But later in the show, Dutch Mantel mentions the Honky Tonk Man is going to be on the card Monday night.
Yep.
But he's not. So it makes me wonder if originally the Rock and Roll Phantom was going to be the Honky Tonk Man, and we shifted gears somewhere along the way. Because you know who the Rock and Roll Phantom ends up being.
No, right? I don't.
All right, we'll talk about it when we get there. Even though it's not revealed Monday night. I don't know. They got revealed for months, but we're going to talk about who the Rock and Roll Phantom actually was when we get to the Monday night card. But right now, after Jarrett's promo, Corey runs down all the spot shows coming up, the action around the territory, and Honky Tonk's name gets mentioned several times there. A lot
That
of the towns
still makes no sense to me why he was doing the spot shows, unless they wanted to draw a bigger crowd in the spot.
I mean, the only thing I can figure is if you think about it and you look at the cards, Lawler's going to WWF a lot right now. Perhaps they just needed a name to anchor these cards in place of Lawler, because most of these cards where you see Honky advertised, you're not seeing Lawler or you're not seeing Jarrett. That's the only thing I can figure is like, hey, we need a name on these cards, but why not use him on Monday nights? Like maybe he wasn't available. I don't know, but I guess that's something I need to do some more looking into. But Dave Brown lets us know that due to USWA's open door policy, there's a new tag team called PG-13 coming soon, and we see this music video.
Love it.
This
Love
is our
PG-13.
very first look at a tag team that's going to become a staple of the USWA. Let's take a look at this.
And I'm some Wood BT. And we're coming on strong. Let's do the DOP. Believe me, fighters. Not storybook writers. Step on, punk. Cause we'll burn your life by the name PG-13. There's no two greater. All the ladies want to know. Hey, what you doing later? Everybody step aside, cause we can't be stopped. You out of shape. And out of date. And you might get dropped. This is a challenge. So accept it if your brain's that crazy. For one wrong move. And you'll be pushing up Dave who beats you down. Leave you hurting. Have you saying, please get off me, JCI. Yes, sir, Wood BT. Taking out suckers just like you never seen. Everybody jump up for PG-13. Hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, ho. Hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, ho. What's up? You didn't think we could do it. Yo, 1993 USWA. These funky lyrics are brought to you by the one and only hip-hop tag team, PG-13. Two names you won't soon forget, JC Ice. Sir Woofy D, we outta here. Peace.
Hey, ho, hey.
If you're watching or listening to this and this video jumps from me going, hey, let's hear this video, to me going, well, there it was, and you hear BT singing, hey, ho.
Hey,
it's because YouTube and the other podcast services made us cut it because of the Naughty by Nature music. But I'm hoping, since the rapping was done by Jamie and Wolfie, that maybe, just maybe, it'll slide under the radar.
Sampled. It was sampled. I actually... I have a connection to Wolfie D that's really weird. I think Wolfie was on the card, but I do know his dad was on the card. The very first card I wrestled on was in Columbia, Tennessee, and his dad wrestled on that show. And I
Who's
think...
his dad?
Do what?
Who's his dad? Like,
I don't know what his name was.
Or he's just an outlaw guy?
I can't remember. I'm assuming he was an outlaw guy, but I may be wrong. But yeah,
but he's not JD Wolf, a guy who was doing jobs a few weeks ago.
No.
We did learn that was not true.
But yeah, and I had a lot of questions about this video because this was the very first. I was so excited. This was the show I got to review with you because this was the very first video ever we revealed this team of PG-13 in the history. And I don't think I'm overstating this. The history of this tag team throughout Memphis, WWE, after their careers were over, with Jamie Dundee shoot interviews and all of that.
Yeah.
It's legendary, just a legendary tag team. And you had contacted Wolfie, and I asked Wolfie something. I'm not going to tell you what I asked him because I think he's going to come on the show and talk about it later on about what, and you had already contacted him about the actual formation of the team and all that.
Because, so in 1993, we've seen Jamie for a few years in and out, with his dad, Bill Dundee. He was a heel manager up in USA Wrestling in Knoxville, with the little jumpsuit getting called Gumby by the fans, and
I called
and
him Gumby one night, and he was there in Jonesboro working the gimmicks table for his dad. He wasn't working. This is before he was ever shown on TV here. And I started chanting Gumby, me and my friends did. And I went over to the picture table, and he's like, how did y'all see that? And I was like, we trade tapes. But yeah, that was a fun time with Jamie.
And then eventually Sid Vicious breaks his neck for an angle. And then, he's JC Ice Baby, and he manages guys like, Steve Austin and a bunch of the Texas guys. And, he's done a little bit of wrestling and all this. Wolfie up to this point is doing, I guess what you say at this point, they're still called outlaw shows, but he's like known as Airwolf, I believe, was one of the gimmicks he used. And we'll let him come on and tell the kind of, I've heard, kind of how they came together and how this came to be. But I'm really excited to have, we're going to have Wolfie on to talk about it. I've talked to Jamie. We're going to have, I'm going to see Jamie in Jonesboro here in a couple of weeks at that convention, and we may record something live, or we may get him on the podcast to give his memories of it as well. But I'm excited to talk to those guys about this because they were one of the last great tag teams you watched evolve from this first video. And they start out as just like little undercard heels. I mean, these guys, as we watch them develop here, going down the line, they're using the hubcap to beat enhancement guys. I mean, it's heat. And they built themselves up down through the years in USWA. Most people will tell you the last big money drawing angle in Memphis was PG-13 against Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich.
It was, it was one of those things that was drawn when nothing else was drawn. And it was because, number one, you're looking at Rich and Doug, people believed them. And then they really loved PG-13, and it really did. It did well for them. And all right, y'all guys were talking about you, Richard and Josh, about Jeff Jarrett and about how he got such a bad rep. But Jeff was a professional wrestler at this time. He had the whole package, the gear, the hair, the whole deal, and he could work. He was a really good worker. But something that I've always said, you got a poster behind you, Memphis Heat.
Yep.
I think there should be a documentary on the day Jimmy Hart left. From that point on, to see what happened to Memphis Wrestling. And if you think about it, PG-13 is, as you said, they got over, blah, 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 but they was probably the last tag team or last person to be pushed above kind of Dundee and Lawler. And Jarrett, you look, Jeff Jarrett, Brian Christopher, and PG-13, and this was 93, were probably the last stars that they tried to make. I threw Kevin White in there because he got really good ratings against this feud with Dundee when USWA was in the Corey Macklin years.
Right.
But they PG-13, that's a long time, and they would not push anyone for the fear that they were going to the WWE. It's what they said back then. But even now they have a hard time pushing people that way. So it's crazy. It's really crazy.
And the story goes that, regardless of how, what anybody thinks about him or whatever, that, Randy Hales is the responsible for pushing PG-13. And he not actively did that, that probably wouldn't have happened, because there were a lot of people skeptical and was really just waiting for him to crash and burn so they could be like, oh, we told you those guys couldn't get over. And it worked. And I think the great thing about them is, they got heat on the front end because they were small guys, and most people in the crowd were like, I could whoop their ass. So it got them heat. But then once, they showed they were tough and, they proved themselves, then they were relatable. And people were like, man, these guys aren't big, but damn, they'll fight. Doug and Tommy had done everything in the world to them, and they had come back, they had shaved their heads and, beat up his mom and all these different, blinded him at one point, blinded Wolfie at one point, and just did everything but, run over him with a car, because Eddie Gilbert had already done that to Lawler. But, yeah, they just, they got over huge. And like you say, that's a whole nother series of podcasts to talk about the push or lack thereof of everybody after them. So we'll steer this back on the road before we get too far out.
And Wolfie was the odd man out because he took Brian Christopher Lawler, Jeff Jarrett, and Dundee there, Jamie Dundee. So they had the in, and Wolfie was the guy that was kind of, the oddball, but he did get the push. And Randy Hills, like you said, I've been told many times that Randy had a lot to do with the push of PG-13.
Yeah, Wolfie will tell you that, and I believe Jamie will too. And we'll find that out because we'll have them both on the podcast.
Okay, I'll quit marking out on PG-13.
But speaking of, Bert Prentice comes out for a promo, and he puts over PG-13.
Yes, he does.
He tells Dave Brown that that they're going to be a big deal and wait and see. But then we pick up where we've been leaving off with Bert the last several weeks with all his Bubba Johnson talk of Miss Texas had a sex change. So, we recently on the show, Josh talked about what a big fan of Bert he was and him as a heel manager. And before we see this clip of Bert and Miss Texas, just kind of give me, one, your thoughts on Bert in general, and two, your thoughts of this particular angle, because I read Bert's book, and I think Bert was really driving this angle and really pushed for this whole Bubba Johnson narrative and all that. It was his, and I guess if Mike Samples was booking at the time, Mike co-signed it. And what do you think about it up till now?
I thought it was just the comedy part, and I believe Josh said something about it. Memphis always had some comedy going on in the booking, no matter who was, and I was okay with it. I think I was tired of it by now. And just the joke, was it a joke, or was it, everyone knows it's not true, so why do you keep doing it, kind of thing. Loved your story about Bert and the grab bag. Bert was a very unusual guy. He really was. He was really always super nice to me. I'm actually in the book, by the way, just to let you know, Jim.
You are. I remember seeing your name in there.
I am.
I meant to message you when I read your name, and maybe I did. It's been a long time ago since I read it, but I was like, hey, Brian's in here.
I mean, not that I.
Well, there you go.
Here on the
desk
or anything. Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't have a bookmark at where I was in the book. So no, that's not it. But yes, Bert was Bert was carny. Gene.
Oh yeah.
He was so carny but he was a good manager. He really was a good manager. I wasn't a huge fan of his like Josh was, but I really thought he was good, and he was well known to be able to make money in the business, even though kind of like the Jarrett way. Jarrett made money in the business, but no one else did, but 2 or 3 people. So he was known to do that. Didn't have a really, Bert didn't like me at one time. He liked me one time. He didn't like me, same. Yeah. That's the way the business is when you're doing kayfabe sheets and stuff. But yeah, I this angle just was getting boring he knocked the shit out of it.
We're fixing to see that.
Do it. Show it.
Yeah, man. Bert, I do respect the fact. I get the people who like him and don't like him, and there were a lot of sides to Bert. But the fact that man made a living via professional wrestling all the way up to the day he died, I mean, it says something. I mean, yeah, you can say he was carny, and Lord knows he was, but he was making money in wrestling at a time that everybody had tapped out, went home, and nobody was making money, and he still was doing it. And hey, if he was the only one making money, he didn't have a gun to anybody's head, So, but yeah, let's take a look. Let's take a look at this interaction with him and Miss Texas here.
I am the happiest human being in the planet. Finally, Eddie Marlin woke up and gave me the match that I've been begging for months and months and months. Miss Texas, me and you, one-on-one, and a back alley street brawl match. That match has been tried. People can just look at her and see that she's a man. There's Miss Texas right here.
Listen here, you fat slob. I'm sick and tired of you accusing me of being a phony. Now, when I get you in the ring, I'm going to rip all your clothes off because I'm not too sure about myself.
Oh, you're not? You sure about that? Hey, look, hey, get out of here.
Hey, don't do that stuff out here.
Prentice, get out of it.
Come on, Prentice.
Leave her alone.
Boy, Miss Texas holding on in there. Miss Prentice, boy, he deserves every bit of what he's getting in there. Here comes out Eddie Marlin. Boy, he
Eddie
hold off and slapped Miss
Eddie
Texas.
got them separated. Tell you what, Miss Texas did better than hold her on. I think Prentice.
Man, he slapped the shit out of her.
He slapped the shit out of her and he laid her out. But holy, she beat his ass when she got back up.
Have y'all talked about that? She's well known to be stiff as.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have said on this show, I mean, while I wouldn't, like we talked about earlier, I would probably grab my bag and leave if I had to wrestle the Harris Brothers or the Moondogs. I'd probably grab my bag and leave if I had to wrestle Miss Texas. And as far as Bert even being able in a working state, say, I finally got the match I wanted, a back alley street brawl with Miss Texas, there ain't a Memphis payoff under the sun that you would have paid me to get me to have a back alley street fight
let's
with Miss
talk
Texas,
about
and I'm
back
3
alley
times her size.
Tell me about this match, Gene. And you didn't let Bert explain it, but Bert does explain it. This is the weirdest match ever in professional wrestling for me.
And it's not just they made it up for this match. I've heard them use this for other back alley street brawls in the past.
Where they take, I've been there live, and Jimmy Hart running back in his underwear. You got to rip you got to rip the clothes. You got to sexually assault.
This ain't a match we're having in 2024. Obviously,
man, I always thought that was a and especially when it was 2 guys wrestling, I'd be like,
yeah, I was like, why are we, who wants to see this? Like, what are we doing? Like, Bert wants to see it, but not, but it's a very weird concept. So yeah, the way you win, as BT was just alluding to, it's a street fight as implied. We're gonna just throw down in fisticuffs like we just saw. But the only way you win is to strip your opponent. Kind of like the old tuxedo match. So it's like a Southern street fight mixed with a tuxedo match, but they're not wearing tuxedos. And my God, if you're there, if you're a fan or, a male fan, even if you're a Miss Texas fan, you got to be rooting for her to lose because you don't want Bert stripped. You'd much rather have Miss Texas stripped than Bert, so.
And you're talking about Miss Texas, we're talking about her being stiff. One of my friends in the business, been out of the business for a long time. Brandon Baxter, he's a big deal here in Jonesboro as a DJ. Been here for a long time as with the radio station. He worked Miss Texas a lot, and he says it is horrible. Every freaking night she was tight. She was nice and everything, but gosh, she was stiff. So. Yeah, she beat the shit out of him. So.
She felt like she had a point to prove. So you can go down the line, Brandon, Bert, Downtown Bruno, Jamie Dundee, Wolfie D, all those guys wrestled Miss Texas and got their head beat in. I'm sure Bruno has had to have told you some stories about Miss Texas. I love Downtown Bruno. I'm so excited to finally, I did a podcast with Bruno years and years ago on the old Cheap Heat radio days. But yeah, this Jonesboro thing, I'm really excited. There's a handful of people I'm excited to meet, and Downtown Bruno is at the top of that list. And since
I told you
and him are good friends, I'm sure you can make that happen. So I'm looking forward to
that. I was at the con in Evansville. I had my own table, and he walks in and he goes, "Hey, you want to help me with my table?" And I'm like, man, there'll be more people at his table than my people. And I went over to his table and got his photos and started setting everything up. And my wife was there with Steve Crawford. Steve Crawford was with us. He's probably somebody here that y'all all know on this network. And she looked at Steve and she said, "Look at him over there marking out for Downtown Bruno." So that's true. Downtown Bruno is just, he's one of the, I don't know, one of the best guys in the business, kind of like Bobby Eaton that I've met.
He's one of those guys that my dad was a big fan of, and I remember my dad would always stop whatever, because he would be doing other things. He's cleaning his rifles for hunting or whatever, and we'd be watching wrestling, and he would stop whatever he's doing and watch the Downtown Bruno promo, and he would always pop when Bruno would hit it. Mama says it bees that way sometimes, and he would say that at random times all the time because of Downtown Bruno.
Well,
he was super psyched when I got to interview him for the podcast that time. He thought that was just awesome.
If you want to hear questions asked to Downtown Bruno that have never been asked before, listen to the STSPod.club, the last episode that he was on. I've only had him on one episode, and I made it a point. I tried my best to ask him some really out of the world questions about when he was with Giant Gonzalez, why he ate somewhere, what he did. I mean, it was really strange, and it was a really good interview. He's so honest. He's so honest with everybody. And then, with your background that you got, he may not even talk to you.
He may not. Who knows? But we'll. Well, if I say what I'm planning to say, he may swing at me. I don't know. It's gonna be fun. I'm gonna try to have Rosie having a video camera pointed at me when that introduction happens. Jimmy Street's like, make sure you record that. But
yeah, we'll get
anyway. So now it's time for our main event. Now, bear in mind, Brian, we've been through a whole episode of this show, and we are getting ready for our third wrestling match.
Right. That's
of the entire show. But it should be a good one, as we're getting ready to see the Southern Heavyweight Champion, Brian Christopher, with Bert Prentice, taking on Uncle Nightmare Danny Davis. So let's take a look at a clip of some of the action, and then we'll talk about it, and then we'll start getting down to the nitty-gritty like we do at the end of the show and see what you really think about all this. But first, let's take a look at this few highlights of this main event here.
Nightmare Danny Davis. Davis backs him up against the ropes, whips him in. Christopher goes around up under Danny Davis. Oh, yeah, and he just made the greatest move ever.
Yeah, he's outsmarted him. Well, back into the corner. Christopher with a knee lift to the midsection. Danny reverses him. Look at that. Well, Brian says, hey, look at me. Oh, yeah, little strut down the apron. I don't know if he's making Danny mad or not, but when he does that stuff, kind of irritates me a little bit. How about you, Corey? Again.
Whips Danny. Oh, reversal. Danny whips him in, and Christopher leaps over the ropes again.
Well, same situation, different side of the ring, as Danny reversed him into the turnbuckles, and Christopher just rolled over the rope.
Yeah, he was out strutting around and celebrating, and Danny clobbered him. Boy, he busted Christopher.
Brian,
on the floor.
Brian, you're not going against a rookie here.
Christopher go down after that, and Bert Prentice jumps up on the apron. Danny Davis comes over, sits Prentice down. Look out, Danny.
Look out behind, knee to the back by Brian Christopher. Danny Davis knocked through the rope. Prentice grabs him down here, and the referee is calling for the bell. Interference by Bert Prentice is going to be the ruling, I'm sure, and that's going to be a victory for Danny Davis, but now it's 2 against 1 down on the floor as Prentice holds him up. Brian Christopher works him over. Paul Neighbors trying to help out, but he's shoved back by Bert Prentice. This match is over, but the action continues.
Prentice better watch it. He may get a fight in there himself. Takes Paul and shoves him down over there now. Paul goes flying. Here comes Jeff for Danny Davis. Jeff Jarrett nails Christopher.
Just in time to prevent Danny Davis from getting a pile driver on the floor. He nailed Christopher, and now Brian is crawling.
Damn good match, man. Just Danny and Brian. And if you're listening to this and you're in the business, whether you've been here for a long time or you're just getting started and you want to learn some stuff, watch this match. Watch what Brian Christopher does. Remember, self-taught. He just listened to what people said. But all that stuff, that heel stuff he does before, he wasn't really giving Danny shine. I mean, he was, but he wasn't, because every time Danny would try to do the move, then he would do something, and then him doing what he did outside all the dancing and just so good. And Danny, and I was going to ask you, I saved this question because you're better on dates and stuff than me. Continental, when was the Nightmares with the star, the makeup and everything? When was this, before or after the big run?
Oh, this is definitely way after. So the mask came off in Continental in 86, I believe, either late 85, 86, and then they had the Stars. And then around late 87, 88, Danny, they leave Continental for a little while. And when they come back, Danny is just jacked. Like, he doesn't look like the same dude. Ken looks exactly the same, but from that point on, he looks like a different guy. And they did I was a huge fan.
Yeah, me too. They did the Tommy Rich angle, the Tommy Rich Eddie Gilbert angle, didn't they? Where they turned.
Yes.
When Danny was the heel, right?
Eddie Gilbert was booking Continental at the time, and they ran that angle back where so they had a babyface Continental tag title defense against the Southern Boys, and they did the spot where Steve or Tracy went to do a leapfrog and didn't clear Davis, and took one to the nuts, and Danny's waiting to see if he's okay, and Ken's like, pin him. So they get in a little tussle over that. A couple of weeks of that, finally Ken turns on him, and then they do the bit just like with Tommy and Eddie, where Ken comes out and he apologizes profusely, and he's bleeding because Danny had busted him open, run him in the ring post, and they played the angle the exact same way, and it got over great. It fired their feud up, and then of course, Eddie ends up leaving in the middle of it, and it all fizzled out. That's a whole other story. But yeah, Danny. I mean, we talked about that on this show. If Danny Davis would have been taller, there's no telling what he could have done in wrestling in WCW or the WWF. Because I mean, he was good with the promo. He was fiery. He was everything you wanted a babyface to be. But I mean, the Nightmares were super heels too in Memphis and Continental. With the mask.
They were so over. And the thing that they don't. Danny also was. The Nightmares were like doing stuff that the Young Bucks. Everyone talks about the Young Bucks were doing in merch. Danny and Fabs, they always talk about the Fabs making so much money in merch, but Danny was the businessman for the Nightmares, and he would take all the money, split it up, give it to Ken, but he made T-shirts, photos when they were babyfaces. They were making so much money on the gimmicks table that they didn't even they weren't worried about that payoff every time. But yeah, I talked to Ken one time, and he had a bunch of stuff in storage, and Danny would just hand Ken the money at the end of the night and say, "Here's your share." And Ken would never count it or anything; he would just put it in one of his barrels or one of his things. He was going through a bunch of them and found a bunch of money of $1 bills that Danny had give to him. But they were so over, just unbelievable. I love the Nightmares. I always liked them as the Nightmares. For some reason, I like mass wrestlers, and I knew who they were, so I yelled at Ken one time when he was in the ring. It was an outside show, and I said, "Hey, Ken," like if I said, "Hey, Gene," you turn around, and he turned around in the ring with the mask on. I was like, "Ah!" But yeah, big Nightmare fan, and Danny Davis, like you said, if he would have been taller, he was just so good. And Danny went on to help so many people in the business. He understood it too. There's something about Danny's psychology and all that underutilized in this territory. But when he took over his own stuff and started doing that, he was able to help people. So he would be a great guy to have on. So
I would love. That's what I told Josh. Like, come on, man, you got to pull some strings. He's like, I don't know, but I'll
Uncle
try.
Nightmare,
Uncle Danny, come on, brother. I was watching a match for our 1985 podcast that me and Ray do this morning. And it was a match between the Nightmares and the Rock and Roll Express. It was post mask, but they were heels. And man, what a great match! I mean, they were doing stuff in 1985 that was so far ahead of its time, even as heels.
So I got a real quick Nightmare story. Sidebar. Well, I started reading kayfabe sheets in 1986. During Christmas break, it was Christmas break 85. I got a kayfabe sheet and I learned everything about the business. I just want you to know that within the Christmas
You've
break,
been an expert ever since.
I've been an expert ever since. No, but then I got this I got this tape thing. It was I remember the dude's name. His name was Steve Minari. He was from St. Louis, and he had all these illegal size tape. He had tapes, but every month he did a newsletter, tape, you sell tapes, whatever thing, and he did a ranking of the top tag teams in the United States. And the number one team at the time was the Nightmares. And I was like, what? But the readers of that, the kind of the kayfabe sheet, the Observer, Torch readers, loved the Nightmares and put them over big time. But yeah, they had some of the, they grew up together. Ricky Morton and Ken did. They had some of the best matches they can have good matches with anyone. So
just about. I mean, because we had been watching them have this feud with Constance and Ashley.
Oh my God!
They were the Daydreamers, and after a few weeks of that, it's like, oh man! And then you see them wrestle in the Rock and Roll Express. Like, there's my Nightmares. That's what I've been missing right there.
I talked to Jerry Jarrett about them and I've talked to Ken about those two guys. They were horrible. So.
Yeah, they were kind of a lost cause. But anyway, we'll steer it back to 93 here. So let's take our last podcast commercial break here, and then we're going to come back, and Dave Brown's going to run down the card, and then we're going to talk about what we think. All right, here we go.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. So if you're looking to support that next up and coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia.
Right,
PG-13's over with me.
I can tell, man. I can tell. You can't shake it. You can't shake them. But I just wanted to say we're proud to be a part of the WrestleCopia brand and part of the WrestleCopia family over at WrestleCopia.com. And, man, as we went to break, how cold was it for them to use the outro to the break, showing Miss Texas get slapped down on the ground one more time. But I guess that's going to motivate you to go see the card. So let's, real quick here, let's let Dave Brown and Corey run down the card for Monday night, and then I'm going to ask you some all-important questions after that.
Opening match, Danny Davis. What a match he just had today, and what a great thing for Davis to be able to go in with a victory under his belt as he heads into action against the larger, mean Mike Miller in the opening match Monday night on the Super Night at the Coliseum. Goes against Bert Prentice. Prentice came out here and said, I am so happy. I have finally got the match signed I want. He made the mistake of slapping Miss Texas, and she lit into him. And Prentice, you better be worried about the back alley street brawl coming up Monday night.
If he's not, I'm worried for him because Miss Texas is looking for him.
You are right about that. World Tag Team Titles are going to be on the line after that. You got the Moondogs against the Harris brothers.
Man, that's going to be a battle.
You know, these two teams have gone against each other in wild, rugged action time after time. But there's a change now. You know, Moondog Spike was injured, unable to defend the titles. There was the tournament. The Harris brothers end up with the World Tag Titles. But there's a new Moondog. Richard Lee has signed a new one. He's even bigger than the other guys. So you put that in there, and I think you got a little hint today that Mike Samples and the Harris brothers are very, very worried about their chances to successfully defend those world titles come Monday night in this match. Following that, Jeff Jarrett will be going against the Rock and Roll Phantom. Jeff says he thinks he knows who it is, and he certainly knows who's behind it. He says Brian Christopher's behind it. The interesting thing about this match is whoever wins it gets a shot at the title. Speaking of the title will be on the line, Southern Heavyweight belt, as Brian Christopher, the champion, will be bringing the belt to the ring to defend against Oil Trough, Texas' Dirty Dutchman, Dutch Mantel. What a match that ought to be.
Yeah, Dutch will be looking for Brian Christopher, and he'll be looking for that Southern Heavyweight title, too.
I expect he'll be bringing Shoe Baby with him when he... Main event of the night, the Unified World Title is going to be on the line. Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, in to try to take the belt away from the champion, Jerry Lawler. This is one of the biggest matches ever signed at the Mid-South Coliseum.
All right.
All right, so there we go. So, Brian, it's that all-important time of the show. Every week I ask my co-hosts, which are usually Josh and Richard, but they're not here. So today I'm going to ask you these questions. So starting out, what was your least favorite part of today's show that we've watched?
Oh, it has to be the referee stuff, the referee in the ring, and then the whole convoluted $1,000, $2,000. What? I was just, huh? I had to rewind it to figure out what the hell he was talking about. And there was a line, like I said, I liked from that was Samples talking about Eddie stole all the money, which I thought was hilarious. That sounded like a Jimmy Hart line. But yeah, that was the worst part. I never did like it when to me, the referees should always be special. And when they do stuff like this, they kind of take that special from them, you know.
And they did a lot of stuff with Paul Neighbors. Eventually, he ends up being a heel referee. I mean, at one point, there's a match between Lawler and Paul Neighbors with Vince McMahon sitting ringside, and I'm just like, I can't believe Vince McMahon flew to Memphis to watch Jerry Lawler wrestle a referee. Like,
right.
What are we doing? But I actually clipped that segment there of Dave running down the card. I actually clipped like three or more minutes out of them talking about that whole Mike Samples, Paul Neighbors debacle. And also clipped a promo from Dutch Mantel, which was a good promo, but we're running long. And, we all know Dutch is a great promo. He's one of my favorite interviews I've ever done in my life was getting to interview Dutch Mantel. I love that guy. Just one of the best storytellers.
He was really one of my mentors. So he took me to Jonesboro. I rode with him, took him to the shows, and he would tell me all kinds of stuff, watch this match, watch what they do, make sure, blah, blah, blah. So he taught me a lot about the business, psychology, and stuff like that.
Well, nobody knows more about it or understands it better than Dutch. And one of the fun things about that promo, he talked about coming to town to challenge Brian Christopher for the Southern Heavyweight title. But he did mention, I thought it was fun that he made a point to mention how annoying Brian's laugh was.
Right.
Which was certainly true because I was a huge Brian Christopher fan even then. But holy shit, what great heat, because that laugh was so freaking obnoxious. I don't care how.
So good. He was just so good.
It's perfect. Just like in that match with Danny Davis earlier, he'd jump over that rope and then strut down the side of the ring doing that laugh. I mean, you could not be in that crowd and not want to just come out of your chair and throw it at him.
Yeah.
It's one of the top 5 most annoying things in Memphis wrestling history, I would assume. Okay, so of course, the inverse of that. What is your most favorite part of today's show?
One part I really liked the introduction of Splat. I love the Moondogs, the whole deal with them going against the Bruise Brothers or the Harris Brothers, whatever the hell you want. But my favorite part was Uncle Nightmare Danny Davis against Brian Christopher. I thought it was a hell of a match. And like I said, if you watch, and you just said something, we said it both times, we get the payoff of that because Danny eventually gets to punch him with him standing on the side of the ring, carrying on doing that. The match was just put together so smart, and it was a quick TV match. Like I said, if you're in the business, go out of your way to watch the way these guys worked. It was art. It's what it was.
if you're following along, if you listen to or watched all that, and if you're just listening to the podcast, we appreciate you doing it, and we're glad. But you can go on YouTube and watch the video cast of this and see these clips that we're listening to.
And you watch the whole show too. If you decide,
and you can go on and watch and know what we're talking about from beginning to end. But of the episodes we've watched the whole month of January, because today closes out January, Brian Christopher's matches on TVs have had the most psychology and have been the best actual matches. Even his match like with Tony DiNucci was a good one. He had the tag match with Mike Miller. And then this match today with Danny Davis is definitely my favorite. So I'm glad BT agrees. I knew he would. So, all right. So the final question we always ask, if this was 1993, would today's TV have inspired you to go buy a ticket to Monday Night?
Sure. Hell yeah. I'm going to see Hennig against Lawler again. I'm going to get to see the Moondogs against and a new Moondog, huge guy against the Harris brothers. We're going to get to see the Rock and Roll Phantom against who they said it was Jeff Jarrett, and hell, I'm got to go down there and see my old buddy Dutch Mantel, and he's probably going to get me in. So hell yeah, I'm going to the show. He's gonna let me come through the back, and it's gonna be him and Brian Christopher. Hell of a lineup, I think.
You may see Bert Prentice strip naked, but you can go to the concession stand.
Hey, it would be the first time I seen Bert strip naked. Wait, what?
Whoa. I didn't see that. I guess I didn't read everything he mentioned about you in his book. Moving on. February 1st, 1993, Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis. And yes, folks, this week we actually do have the attendance.
Ooh, I want to know.
So, all the hype from today's show has brought the gate back up to 2,082 paid, a total of $11,800, which in 1993 is pretty darn good, as Larry David would say. Opening match saw Jeff Gaylord beat Nightmare Danny Davis via disqualification.
Really? The DQ? And
y'all,
Dave Brown was being nice about Jeff Gaylord.
Now, let me point out one fact about this match. This was scheduled to be Nightmare Danny Davis versus Mean Mike Miller. Now, Mean Mike Miller is somebody that me and Josh and Richard have had a lot of fun watching. We have unexpectedly become Mean Mike Miller fans with all his shenanigans. I'm sad to report that for whatever reason, Mike Miller was not here this Monday night, and he won't be back. The last time you saw Mike Miller on USWA TV was the last time you'd see Mike Miller.
He went back to Portland, I think. He has a really good run in Portland, Mike Miller does.
He does, but I didn't know. I just assumed he was from Portland, but he's from the Memphis area.
I didn't know that.
And he just had his best times in wrestling in Portland, but he's actually from Tennessee, and he's actually back there now. And a couple people have given me means to get a hold of Mike, and I may
I would love,
see if we could get him on the show. That would be fun.
Yeah.
So the third match. So just to reiterate, I think I only mentioned the first match. So yes, Jeff Gaylord beats Nightmare Danny Davis via DQ. Match number 2, Mike Samples beats Paul Neighbors in a boxing match via disqualification. Match number 3. Miss Texas beats. Okay, all right, let's back up.
So wait. So he won. So Paul has to pay?
No. The deal was if Mike loses, this you had to watch it 2 or 3 times.
So I'll have to rewind it.
If Mike lost, if Paul Neighbors won, Mike had to pay both fines, $2,000 total. But if Mike won in any way, shape, or form, both fines got wiped away because he didn't want Paul Neighbors to quit. Even though he didn't like him and they were fighting, he didn't want Paul Neighbors to quit.
Okay, all right.
I guess Mike deep down is just a really good guy at heart. So then in the third match, Miss Texas beat Bert Prentice in the back alley street fight match, which means Bert was stripped and probably beaten profusely.
Oh, God.
In the fourth match, Jeff Jarrett beat the Rock and Roll Phantom via disqualification. Now, obviously, Jeff was heavily implying that the Rock and Roll Phantom was the Honky Tonk Man because he said, We only know 3 guys related to rock and roll, and 2 of them are the Rock and Roll Express, and they ain't going to be here. And the third one is wanting a shot at me to get a shot at the Southern Heavyweight title, and that's what the Honky Tonk Man had done the previous week. Now, spoiler alert, because he didn't get unmasked here, he's going to continue to be masked. But if you watch next week's show, or if you go on Google right now and you Google USWA, the Rock and Roll Phantom, you're instantly going to know who this person is. The Rock and Roll Phantom was Don Bass.
Oh, my God.
Essentially reprising his old singing cowboy gimmick from '87, because this gimmick mostly involved him bringing a guitar to the ring, dressed exactly like Don Bass would be dressed, except he had a mask on. And him and Bert would lip sync to things like Billy Ray Cyrus's Achy Breaky Heart. Don would play the guitar while Bert would lip sync and dance around the ring. And he did this before just about every match, and we had to see clips of it quite often here. 5th match of the night. Dirty Dutch Mantel beat the USWA Southern Heavyweight Champion Brian Christopher via disqualification. In the 6th match, semi-main event, Moondog Spot and Splat with Richard Lee defeated Ron and Don Harris to actually win the USWA Tag Team Titles that Ron and Don had just won in the tournament last Monday night. So playing hot potato with the tag belts quite a bit here with the Moondogs and the Harris brothers, but I'm okay with that based on what we saw this last week. And then in the main event for the Unified World Heavyweight Title, Jerry the King Lawler defeated Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig via disqualification. So to recap, folks, if you weren't keeping track, we had 7 matches total. 5 of the 7 matches ended in a disqualification. What the fuck, Brian?
I don't remember that happening so often, and just don't know why. And if you look at it, you're killing the business. Maybe it's the reason they only got 2,000 people.
Here's the thing, Brian. I'm the same way. I don't remember this stuff. Me and Ray Russell are doing we're doing week by week in 1985.
Right.
This shit's happening. There was a card recently where 5 out of 6 matches ended in DQ. The main event was Jerry Lawler and Eddie Gilbert in a Texas death match that ended in a disqualification.
Oh, wow.
What? I mean, it's crazy. How come Danny Davis or Jeff Gaylord, one or the other, couldn't pin one or the other?
Well, you get a clean finish. Yeah.
Why can't Jeff beat the Rock and Roll Phantom? Why? I understand. Okay, you brought Dutch in. You don't want to just beat him, so DQ. Fair enough. Curt Hennig, he's not going to come in, and you pretty much knew those 2 title matches were going to have to be DQs. So why are you doing a DQ in the boxing? Mike Samples can't knock out the referee and win, just flat win.
Yeah.
Jeff Gaylord couldn't pin Danny Davis with his feet on the ropes. Like, I don't know, man. And again, we love this stuff. I'm not here. I don't do this show.
Oh yeah, I love Memphis wrestling, but I don't remember the finishes.
Dump
being
on
so
Memphis
screwy.
wrestling, but holy cow, we've had some really screwy finishes each week so far, and this 5 out of 7 is the big winner so far.
Booking 101, you know the reason why you'd have a DQ finish, like you said, might be the Dutch Mantel thing, but it is to provide something for the next week. Maybe we DQ and they get a no DQ, but that's not what they're doing here. Everyone who's booking these finishes is going, okay, we'll do DQ. He don't want to do a job. We don't want to put them over that guy, blah, blah, blah. You had a Mid-South Coliseum where Lawler got pinned. That didn't happen a lot. A couple weeks back.
Lawler got pinned. This is the wild thing to me. Last Monday night, previous to this one, Jerry Lawler got pinned when the Harris brothers won the tag team titles. The following week, the World Heavyweight Champion who got pinned last Monday night by the Harris brothers is defending against Mr. Perfect from the WWF, and the same Harris brothers who just pinned Jerry Lawler are losing to the Moondogs. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of hard to figure it out, and this may be Mike Samples booking at work here. I don't know. I can only imagine, because like I say, it's convoluted. I mean, okay, Mike Samples beat Paul Neighbors by DQ in a boxing match. Does that mean we're going to see a rematch next week of that?
God, I hope so.
Probably, but I hope not. But anyway, it was a good TV. I enjoyed the TV. We had a great main event, great build for Lawler and Mr. Perfect. I liked them bringing Dutch in to challenge Brian, make that fresh, because, I mean, I know we're still keeping Jeff and Brian in the mix to eventually wrestle the Southern title, but holy cow, we can't have the Harris wrestle the Moondogs every week and have Jeff and Brian wrestle every week. And they wrestled a lot with the whole title versus everybody Brian knew's hair on the line but Brian's. Right. But that was pretty well executed. It was
I love that. Brian bringing out everybody.
I mean, the week that he go, I'll do anything for you. Eddie Marlin, get out of here. She's going to put her hair on the line. And she says no. And then here comes Mike and Bert out there. And all right, guys, let's get back together. They're going to put their hair on the line.
Right. I love that. Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, all right, man. Thanks for joining me. Let's plug a few things real quick. Even though they aren't with us this week, remember, check out P3 Radio anywhere that you enjoy podcast. If you go and search, I'm going to put it on the screen if you're watching it, P3 Radio. My wonderful guest here, Brian Tramel. Like I say, he's the man when it comes to podcast. Go to STSPod.club, and as he said, he's got over 800 podcasts. This man has been nothing if not consistent for the last, I don't know how many years.
We put out, right? Yeah, we started putting out 2 episodes about, I want to say 6.5 or 7 years ago. And we have not missed 1 week that we didn't put out at least 2 episodes. A lot of work. I do work with, I provide content for the current Memphis Wrestling at Memphis Wrestling on YouTube. I wanted to put that over. I do videos. I do a podcast where I review the show. Remember, it is content for Memphis Wrestling. So I do hits and misses and stuff like that. And then we interview guys from Memphis Wrestling on the show. We've interviewed, like I said, go through the catalog, and me and Gene had a really good time. And I want to apologize, Gene. This is the first episode of a podcast, I think, that me and you have done where you're driving the ship.
Believe it or not.
Maybe you had me on your podcast one time and you did that.
You came on the cheap heat with me and Xanders, and
that's right. I forgot about
that. Like 3 of us on there, and that was kind of it's hard for 3 people to interview one person.
It's hard for me to shut up sometimes because I'm used to being the one that keeps everything going.
This is as I knew it would be. This is the longest episode of Retro of the Retro Wrestling Review.
What are you saying?
I'm saying I knew me and you would have a lot to talk about.
You forgot to mention something on the episode at the very end as they're leaving the TV screen. Andre the Giant had just passed away. And they mentioned that.
I forgot to note that, but you were right. They mentioned that.
And I want to know, if you are a USWA worker, you were there, and you worked for Corey Macklin, was he as annoying to you as he is to us? I just want to know. Was he? And I have fun Corey Macklin stories. I'll have to come on just to talk about Corey. But he was just not a good announcer in my opinion.
So had you picked up on, I brought this up in a recent episode. I don't know if you saw it, but had you picked up on the there thing with him? In there, over there, and he's over there. And once I noticed it, I can't unhear it. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. I can't do that because it'll be one of those something that I notice all the time. But yeah, I never noticed it till you said something. I always remember Big Moo. We always joke about that.
Which is a shirt over at our store. If you check out tinyurl/USWA podcast, we've got a number of shirts, but we have a Corey Macklin Big Move t-shirt over there. So make sure you check that out. Thank you for unknowingly segueing into that there, BT. See, you're such a master at podcasting. You don't even know sometimes when you're saying.
I know. I just start plugging shit, just for the hell of it. So there you go.
Check out our Facebook there, facebook.com/Retro Wrestling Review. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at USWA Podcast. And I want to thank everybody for, man, we're getting a ton of great engagement on Facebook. Man, there's a lot of people watching and sharing our videos. Jerry Lawler's Facebook, he's sharing a lot of our videos and stuff. And so it's getting us a lot of followers. So just want to tell everybody I appreciate that. If you need to contact the show, I've been getting a lot of great feedback. You mentioned earlier the fact that, we kind of put over Jeff Jarrett. I had a number of people message me and like, hey man, thank y'all for, sticking up for Jeff Jarrett and putting him over. Cause a lot of people don't do that, but I mean, I think Jeff's a great guy. He's always been a great worker and a really great wrestler. And I mean, I don't listen to a lot of wrestling podcasts, but when I do, I enjoy Jeff's podcast. He, I think it's giving people a lot of insight to who Jeff really is and his side of the story and a lot of things.
Well,
so he has that.
Yeah, his podcast is my favorite because he mentioned my name. So that I have to. And I also want to say something. This 1993, at one point, 87, 88, 89, 90, during that time, I was the Memphis guy for Meltzer. So any of those Wrestling Observers that you're reading, that was me. But during this time, I was not providing any news whatsoever. You said they didn't know that was Ken Wayne. I would have known it was Ken Wayne.
You definitely would have known. Yeah, I knew you weren't the source there, because as soon as he opened his mouth, I'm like, that's definitely Ken Wayne. There's no question about that.
Gene, when you come over here to Jonesboro, when you come in this way, you need to stop at Honky Town, USA. It's right there off exit. I think it's 22. So Honky Town is awesome.
I have promised I'll get Rosie a T-shirt and an inflatable guitar when we stop at Honky Land, USA. She's very excited.
Oh, Honky Land. I call it Honky Town. So.
Oh, well, maybe it is Honky Town. Well, I mean, any town you're in ends up being Honky Town eventually. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to us. Once again, look at you. You are on fire today, dude. You're segueing your ass off because, yes, if you enjoyed, as much as I'm sure you've enjoyed hearing and seeing me and BT together on your screen today, you can see us live in person at the Memphis Wrestling Fan Fest together Saturday, June the 29th, Earl Bell Community Center, Jonesboro, Arkansas, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I have to ask before I'll let you do a better version. But you did it earlier. I was about to say, whenever you start your podcast, no matter what episode it is, you say that you are live from SDS Studios in Jones. Is that a homage to Corey Macklin?
No, it's just
I like to think it is. No,
I'll say it. Yeah. I was going to say, I don't care what you just said. Every podcast yours, I'm going to continue in my mind to go, that's BT's homage to the late great. And I don't think we've addressed that on the show. He's no longer with us, bless his heart. I do 304 Studios, and 304 is my street number, so that's where we get 304 Studios. Okay. I do Jonesboro, Arkansas, just because I do that, but I do, and then I say STSPod.club
in there.
Production is what
Production's in there. I want you to add that just for me from now on. So I'll catch it when I'm listening. If you say
Production,
Jonesboro, Arkansas, in there, it's a.
And Gene, I gotta tell everybody so that they'll know, I love my mama.
That's the rumor. I've heard that throughout the years, and I'm actually starting to believe it at this point. And before we go, I know that's your sign off, but you did get ahead of me. We got to point out WrestleCopia.com. That's where it all happens. You can find this podcast. You can find a plethora of wonderful podcasts, including the one I mentioned earlier, me and Ray Russell talking about Memphis in 1985. They talk about UWF in 1986, Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1981. You got the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop. You got Dave Dynasty's podcast, The Other Ship. I mean, just so many great podcasts over there.
My two other friends, Jamie Ward and Steve Cropper, are involved in that.
That's
network
right.
Of episodes.
Steve is involved in our 85, and Jamie is the one who hosts. I mentioned 1981 Georgia. That is our friend Jamie Ward, who's, spoiler, he's going to be my special guest co-host next week.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Retro Wrestling Review. And we may even have a run-in from our good friend from WrestleCopia, Ray Russell. So thank you all for joining us. BT, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I knew we were going to have a good time, but hell, we had an even better time than I expected. And who could have imagined that?
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.
All right. We're going to have you do it again. And one more time, because I stepped on it having to come back and promote WrestleCopia. Maybe I'll edit it, but tell us one more time, because, you know, we just had Mother's Day recently. So remind us one more time.
We're going to be here. Same bad time, same bad channel. On the best little retro podcast in the business. Be there. And as everyone knows, and Gene, you know this, I love my mama.
In there? Oh, that doesn't work. Let's scratch that.